Laura Kent watched the stars slide past the observation window. The bridge hummed with quiet activity. Men and women moved with calm steps. They had done this many times before. Small tasks, small checks. It felt like a routine patrol. Laura liked the steady rhythm. It made her feel safe. She was captain of the patrol ship Aurora. The Aurora was not a great warship. It was a fast cutter made for scouting and rescue. It carried a dozen fighters and a small crew. For years the patrols had been enough. For years the Galactic Union had held together. Outside, the outer system slept in wide silence. The Union kept many borders thin. No one expected a sudden storm. The Varix Empire had taken worlds before. The Union had beaten them back on some fronts. Yet the Empire moved with a steady hunger. Their ships were many. Their victories were quick. Ethan Cole sat 2 decks below in engineering. He ran his fingers along the reactor's casing as if feeling its mood. Ethan had spent long nights on ships like this. He could tell when a core was tired or when the sensors were unusually warm. Tonight the sensors had told him a quiet lie. The numbers did not fit the usual patterns. Ethan tapped the console. He sent a scan out across nearby space. The readouts came back with small anomalies, little blips of energy the size of a single mining drone. He frowned. Then the blips grew. They came from beyond the patrol zone. He called the bridge. Bridge, this is engineering. I am seeing spikes on the long-range array. They are small, but they are growing. Laura turned in her chair. Show me, Commander. The display on the bridge filled with grainy lines. The spikes were thin at first. They pulsed like a slow heartbeat. Each pulse jumped a little farther into space. Laura watched them move along the grid. Could be a star flare, said Marcus Hale, the science officer. Not at this distance, said Ethan. The pattern is wrong. It is organized. It looks like something is powering up. Laura felt a cold line run down her spine. She had read the reports. The Varix did not usually hide. They struck and struck hard, but they did not need to hide until now. They were spreading like a shadow. If those spikes were what Ethan thought, then they were not alone. Late that night, the Aurora picked up a distress signal. A refugee vessel drifted on the edge of a dead system. The signal was weak. The hull of the refugee ship was torn. The driver had set it on a slow glide to find help. Laura ordered a small shuttle out. She took a quick team with her. The shuttle moved like a small bird through empty cold. When they boarded the refugee ship, the smell of smoke hit them first. The corridor lights were broken. The air was thin. They found a cabin with 3 survivors. One of them was alien. He had skin like wet stone and eyes that shone silver. He moved slowly. He carried a small package that he guarded like a child. The other 2 were human. They were near death. Laura felt anger. She felt pity. The alien spoke in broken trade tongue. Ethan had learned enough of that language to understand the meaning in the voice. Varix, the alien whispered. They came like a tide. We fled to warn. Laura knelt and took the alien's hand. It was cold. You are safe here. Tell me where they came from. The alien coughed. He pressed the package into Laura's palm. It was a thin cylinder with a soft glow. He said, Map. Shows the path, shows the force. They will not stop. Ethan and the science officer worked for hours to read the cylinder. The patterns were old and tough to crack. Marcus used the ship's small lab and a fresh set of algorithms. The cylinder yielded a map in simple lines. It showed a corridor through unclaimed space. At one end the Varix had a cluster of new ships. At the other end the line pointed toward the human borders. The alien's name was Trell. He had been an officer on a cargo hauler. Spoke of a raid on a small colony world. The Varix had come without warning. They used designs that tore holes in the hulls of stations. Trell said the Varix took everything they could. They killed those who fought back. Laura made a report. She sent the map to Earth Command. She asked for help. The message rose up through the comm channels like a small bird calling for its flock. It would take time to fly. Time was what Laura did not have. Earth Command was far away. The Council on Earth argued in slow voices. There were always other priorities: trade disputes, political posturing, old grudges. Admiral Nathan Drake was in charge of the nearest fleet. He answered with a promise. He would send what he could, but he needed days to gather enough ships. He said words to calm the voices on the command deck. He could not promise more than that. The refugee told more stories. The Varix did not take only goods. They took minds. They had a way of breaking the will of a population. Trell said the Variks used drones that mimicked the voice of lost loved ones. They sent messages of mercy and doom at once. People opened their doors in hope and met death. Laura felt the weight of it. She did not have a fleet. She had a cutter and a handful of fighters. She had courage and rules written in old manuals. And she had a crew who trusted her. They could not hold the line alone, but they could slow the shadow. Ethan worked nights and days. He pushed the Aurora's engines beyond design parameters. He modified shields with spare parts from the refugee ship. The crew learned to patch on the fly. The cutters and fighters were not meant for long battles. They were meant for quick hits. Laura changed their purpose. She gave each fighter pilot a new kind of mission. They would act like dogs in the wind. They would peek, bite, and run. They would not face the full blade of the Variks. They would find soft spots and pull away. It was dangerous. It was clever. Still, the spikes on the long-range array kept growing. The map showed more lights than Trell first said. The Varik scouts came closer. Scouts were small and fast. They took up positions around dark giants. They tested the human systems, poking at security and listening. On a thin rim world called Halden, miners woke to foreign lights. They saw ships hang like black birds in the night. Panic spread. Messages came through with fear in the words. "We see them. We see the shapes in the sky. They carry no flags." Laura ordered the Aurora to move. She felt a tightness in her chest. She thought of the miners on Halden. She thought of the small children who slept in thin shelters. She thought of Trell's eyes and the way he guarded the package. When the Aurora jumped into Halden's orbit, the sight was worse than the messages. Drones cut across the sky like knives. The shipping lanes were full of debris. Stations burned. The miners had no ships to fight back. Many hid and hoped that the fire would pass. The Aurora moved to protect the fleeing vessels. Laura watched her pilots bring down a drone with a careful burst. One pilot, Lucas Hill, made a hard turn and took a hit. His fighter twisted and fell. Laura felt the ship die in her hands. She watched the small flare mark the place of his fall. Lucas's loss hit the crew. He had been young and sure. He had told jokes in the mess and kept the engines clean. The crew felt the weight of his absence. Grief made their faces hard. Ethan took charge of training. He pulled pilots into the simulator and made them run the worst scenarios. He put them through the long drills that cut the breath out of a man. He watched them sweat and bite their lips. He did not allow fear to rule them. He used it. He turned fear into focus. The Variks did not stop on Halden. They moved like a blade along a map. The refugees said they saw a new class of ship. These vessels did not look like standard Variks hulls. They were layered and alive. They pulsed with a dark light. Trell had muttered a word that no human language trusted, Deathworlder. The word rolled like a stone through the crew's conversation. Some believed it a rumor. Some felt it like a chill. They sent scouts to the edge of a dark cloud where the new ships had been seen. Ethan took one of the small corvettes. He and a pilot named Olivia Grant lowered into the cloud like two fish into a dark sea. The sensors screamed and then went mute. When the corvette punched through the outer edge, a line of shapes moved into view. They were not many at first, but the shapes had edges like teeth. The hulls seemed to drink light. When a scout beam touched one, it bent like a living thing. Ethan felt the ship's metal shiver. He put his hands on the seat and told Olivia to focus on the display. "We do not fire first. We do not let them know what we fear. We come back and tell the truth." They returned with images. The bridge fell silent as the ghostly photos play on the screen. These ships were built for more than war. They had curves that held weapons in hidden hollows. They carried systems that chewed at shields and at mines. Marcus ran the data until his eyes blurred. He said, "If this is true, they are not like the Variks we faced before. These designs are darker. They have an organic layer. They adapt." The message to Earth Command found a new tone. Laura wrote the words with hands that did not shake. She asked for immediate reinforcements. She asked for the name that Trell had whispered. She wrote Deathworlder and watched the letters sit like heavy stones on the page. Her message left the ship and floated toward Earth Command. It would reach the Council. It would meet the slow machine of politics. For now, the Aurora stood watch. The crew patched, they mourned, and they waited. Night after night, the spikes on the array grew. The shadows at the edge of known space thickened. The Union had faced hard things in the past. They had lost and won. They had made peace and blood. But nothing in history could claim how fast the Deathworlder ships could reach. Laura sat alone in the dark observation bay once. She held Trell's small cylinder. She could not read its last lines. It held a message in a tongue that no machine had yet solved. She thought of the miners on Halden. She thought of Lucas's laugh. She closed the cylinder and put it in her pocket. The Aurora slid through the cold and kept its watch. It was a small light in a wide and growing dark. Captain Laura Kent and Commander Ethan Cole both knew that the coming days would break them or make them. They did not say the words, they only did the work. They listened to the hum of the ship and to the slow return of the alarm bells. At dawn on the fourth day, the long-range array flashed a new signature. This time the spikes were not alone. A dark shape moved on the edge of the map. It was large and it carried smaller dots in its wake. The pattern was clear. Ethan stood with Laura at the console. They watched the image grow. "It is them," Marcus said in a small voice. "The fleet." Laura did not feel brave. She felt the same plainness she felt at the sight of a storm coming ashore. She set her jaw. She turned to her crew and spoke with a voice that came from the place she kept for these things. "We do what we can, we hold what we must, we will protect who we can." The men and women on the Aurora took their stations. The pilots checked their harnesses. The fighters hummed. The crew strapped in. The first warships of the Deathworlder Armada dropped out of fold and stepped into the light. They hung like black mountains between the stars. Their shadows spread along the patrol lanes. For a moment, all the small lights of the Aurora looked fragile. On the bridge, Laura felt the old manuals as a thin comfort. She thought of Earth Command and Admiral Drake's promise. Days were precious. A promise was not a shield. And yet, as the first shots of the coming battle drew near, no one on the Aurora lost their small human ways. Marcus whispered a prayer he had not said since his mother died. Ethan checked the straps of another pilot and gave him a hand on the shoulder. Laura breathed in and out. The fleet opened fire. That sound was not just noise. It was the beginning of a history. The Aurora moved into the dark to meet it. The first clash with the Varix ships shook the Aurora so hard that many crew members grabbed the nearest rail to keep from falling. The enemy moved fast and without fear. Their formation was not a straight line. They moved like a living storm, shifting shape, spreading out, tightening again. No one on the Aurora had ever seen ships fight like that. Laura Kent stood in the center of the bridge. Her hands were steady even as the ship rocked. The red markers on the screen multiplied. The Varix did not just attack, they hunted. Ethan Cole watched engine readings jump in wild patterns. He had pushed the Aurora hard before, but this was different. The engines strained as if the ship itself wanted to pull away from danger. Sparks danced across one of the power boxes. Ethan saw them but forced himself not to look away from the main display. He needed to keep the engines alive for as long as possible. The fighters launched from the Aurora and spread wide to cover civilian vessels trying to escape the area. Laura had given a clear order before the battle began: protect the civilians first. Do not let the Varix reach them. The first wave of drones dove toward the fighters with glowing red trails. The pilots moved fast. They fired bursts in short arcs. The drones broke apart, but more took their place. The air around the Aurora filled with bright streaks. Ethan's voice came through the comm. "Captain, we cannot keep this up. We need to fall back or we lose everyone." Laura knew he was right. Her heart wanted to stay. Her mind would not let her make that mistake. "All units fall back to Sector 9, she ordered. "Protect the convoy. Move now." The fighters shifted their paths, pulling away from the fight in a wide curve. The Varix tried to chase them, but the strange ship slowed after a moment. It was almost as if they were not in a rush, as if they were enjoying the hunt. When the Aurora reached Sector 9, the ship was wounded. Plates on the left side were bent inward. A panel in the main corridor had exploded. The shield generator had flickered twice during the escape, but the crew kept moving with sharp focus. They patched what they could. The civilians gathered around the Aurora. Their ships drifted nervously, like small animals hiding behind a wounded guardian. Laura sent an urgent message to Admiral Nathan Drake and included the new images of the Varix ships. She hoped the Admiral understood how serious it was. Ethan and his team worked under dim red emergency lights. They replaced ruined cables and checked the power grid. The Aurora needed to keep flying no matter the damage. Meanwhile, Trell, the alien refugee, recovered slowly in the medical bay. When he was strong enough to stand, he came to the bridge. He leaned on the rail and looked at the map with troubled eyes. "They test your strength," he said. "They watch how you react. This is not their main attack. They wait until you have no space left to run." Laura listened quietly. She could not deny the truth in his voice. Marcus Hale used data from Trell's map to predict where the Variks would strike next. He found something alarming. The scouts had already moved deeper into human territory. Several small outposts near trade routes had stopped sending messages. The fear spread across the Aurora, but no one slowed their work. Once the civilians were safely transferred into underground shelters inside the mining colony, Laura turned her full attention back to the enemy. She reviewed every message, every signal, every scan. Ethan discovered something that gave the crew a small spark of hope. The Aurora still carried an old experimental system built long ago for a different war. The system could boost the engine output far beyond normal levels, but it was extremely unstable. Many commanders in the past had argued that it should never be used. Ethan believed it might be the only chance they had. Laura went down to engineering to see the system herself. The cover panels had been removed, wires spread out like tangled branches. Ethan was covered in dust and grease. "You want to bring that online?" she asked. "We need more power," Ethan said. "We keep running. We keep pulling civilians out. The Variks know this. They will push harder. If they send a bigger fleet before Admiral Drake arrives, we will not be able to outrun them." Laura stood beside him and studied the device. It looked like a cluster of metal rings linked by glowing nodes. It also looked like something that could tear the ship apart if handled wrong. "You have permission to test it," she said finally. "But be careful. If it fails, we lose the ship." Ethan nodded. He knew the risk. While the tests continued, more reports came from across nearby sectors. The Variks had taken 2 more outposts. Survivors spoke of ships with dark living hulls. They described drones that moved like shadows. They said the Variks were building a long corridor through space, cutting through every small settlement in their path. The Union Council received the reports, but the council members argued. Some said the humans were exaggerating. Some said it was a border dispute. Too many voices spoke with pride instead of reason. Admiral Nathan Drake did not waste time arguing. He activated the nearest human battle groups and began gathering a fleet. He studied the images Ethan and Olivia had captured. He did not recognize the strange designs on the enemy hulls. He had fought the Variks years ago. Their ships had never looked like this. He sent Laura a short message. "Hold on, I am coming." But assembling a fleet took time. Laura had very little time. 2 days later, the Aurora received a distress call from a merchant route near the rim. Several large transport ships were trapped along a narrow corridor of space. The Variks had blocked the trade path. Laura could not ignore them. The Aurora jumped into the merchant lane. The transports were running low on power. One had already lost part of its hull. The Variks fired small warning shots, trying to scare the merchants into surrender. Laura ordered her fighters into 2 groups. The first group drew enemy fire. The second struck the drones from behind with sharp and precise shots. Ethan activated the experimental core for the first time. The Aurora surged forward like a beast awakened. The lights dimmed and then brightened again. The ship trembled but did not break. They moved fast enough to shield the merchants. The Variks chased them briefly, then withdrew. It felt like another test. Marcus continued to study the data Trell had provided. His predictions grew clearer. The Variks were not random. They were setting up for a massive strike, a direct path to human territory. Trell returned to the bridge. He watched the new scans with a quiet sadness. "They are coming for your people," he said. "They fear your kind more than you know." "Fear us?" Marcus asked. "Why would they fear us?" "Because you grow stronger when cornered," Trell said. "You adapt in ways they cannot. Humans do not surrender easily. The Variks want to break that spirit." Laura listened with a heavy heart. She knew Trell was right. She also knew the humans were not ready for the enemy's full force. Night fell again across the ship. The crew slept in short shifts. Ethan stayed awake. He ran the core again and again, checking for cracks, leaks, anything that could put the ship at risk. At dawn, the long-range scanners detected something new. A cluster of large Varix ships approached a border world called Lorne. Lorne had only a small military outpost. It could not stand alone. "We must go," Laura said. "If Lorne falls, there is nothing between the Varix and our major colonies." The Aurora jumped into Lorne's orbit. The sight took everyone's breath. Red beams cut across the sky, explosions tore through the defensive towers. The Varix had brought carriers, huge vessels that released drones in waves. Laura sent her fighters straight toward the carriers. Ethan activated the core again. The Aurora dived between rising drones. The shields flashed with each impact. Olivia Grant's fighter was hit hard. Her voice came through the comm. "I can still fly. I'm not leaving." Outpost on Lorne sent one last message. "Our defenses will not hold much longer," Laura answered. "Evacuate into underground shelters. We will cover you." The Aurora took position between the carriers and the surface. Marcus spotted a weak point in one carrier's hull. The fighters targeted it at once. Their combined fire tore open the side of the enemy vessel. It erupted in a bright explosion. But the victory lasted only seconds. More Varix ships appeared like dark islands in the sky. Laura made the hardest decision of her command. "All units fall back. Protect the transports. We cannot stay." The retreat was tight and desperate. The fighters shielded the fleeing ships. Ethan pushed the core a final time. The Aurora shot forward with all the strength it had left. Behind them, Lorne burned under the shadow of the Varix. When they returned to the mining sector, the Aurora looked broken. The left engine coil had burst. The fighter bay doors were twisted. 3 pilots were in the medical wing. Ethan sat alone in engineering. He stared at the core, feeling its heat. It had saved them. It had also nearly destroyed the ship. Laura joined him. "You saved thousands," she said. Ethan shook his head. "We cannot keep doing this alone." "We won't," she said. "Admiral Drake is coming, and we still have work to do." Trell approached them with a small device. "This will help you find the Varix command network. Break their command and their formations fall apart." Laura held the device in her hands. It felt heavier than it looked. The Aurora prepared for the next phase of the war. The dark clouds of the Varix Empire thickened across the stars, but humans were changing. They were adapting. They were preparing for the moment when they would stand as more than survivors. Laura looked out into the silent dark and knew one thing with certainty. The Varix had seen humanity fight, and now the Empire would come harder, but humanity would be ready. The true war had only begun. The Varix Empire spread its shadow across the stars, claiming more outposts and pushing deeper into Union space. Their victories came one after another, and for a time it seemed nothing could slow them. Their fleet grew with each conquered world. Their scouts moved ahead like hungry insects, searching for new weaknesses. They believed the humans were nearly broken after the attack on Lorne, but they were wrong. On the Aurora, Laura Kent and her crew understood they had reached a turning point. They had lost many fighters and the ship was damaged. Lorne had fallen. The Varix were gathering for something bigger than any previous strike. The small battles had been tests. The real war was now on its way. Inside the engineering bay, Ethan Cole stood over the experimental core. The machine pulsed with a faint glow like a heartbeat trapped inside cold metal. He had tested it again and again, trying to find ways to increase its stability. Every time he pushed it harder, the ship shook. Every time he adjusted the lines, new warnings lit up on the console. He wiped sweat from his forehead. He had barely slept. The next battle could destroy them unless they gained more power. One deck above, Laura spoke with Marcus Hale. He had been working nonstop on Trell's device, trying to decode its signals. Trell rested nearby, sitting quietly in a medical chair. His strength was returning, but his face remained tired. "What did you find?" Laura asked Marcus. "The Varix control network is more complex than we thought," Marcus said. "Their fleets move like one mind. These signals come from a central relay. If we can find it, we can break their formation." Trell nodded slowly. "The Varix trust their command network. They believe it cannot be touched. If you find the relay, they will not expect an attack." "But where is it?" Laura asked. Marcus tapped the hollow map. "The signals repeat in a pattern that points to a star cluster near the dark clouds. If the relay is there, it is deep behind their lines." Laura stood quiet for a moment. She could already imagine the danger. They did not have the fleet strength to launch a full strike, But if they waited too long, the Varix Armada would reach the heart of human space. She needed more time. She needed Admiral Nathan Drake. Far across the stars, the Admiral was assembling the first wave of the human armada. He had pulled warships from every available station. He had called in older vessels and refitted them. He spoke to captains and crews, telling them the truth that the Council had denied for too long. The Varix are preparing for a full invasion, he told them. We stand between them and our worlds. It would still take days for the Armada to reach the Aurora's position. Laura had to survive until then. As the Aurora floated above the mining sector, the crew worked around the clock. Engineers welded patches over damaged hull plates. Pilots practiced maneuvers in the simulators. Marcus and a small group studied the relay patterns. The ship's corridors echoed with hurried footsteps. No one had time to rest. Late one night, Ethan stepped into the hangar bay. The lights were dim. Olivia Grant was there, sitting beside her restored fighter. She was checking each panel one by one. "You should be resting," Ethan said. Olivia smiled a little. "I rest when the war is over." "Then you will never rest," Ethan said. Olivia laughed quietly. "Maybe not, but I can fly again. The damage from Lorne is fixed." Her smile faded when she looked at Ethan. "Do you think we can stop them?" Ethan looked at the fighters lined up in a neat row. They seemed so small compared to the Varix carriers, yet he also remembered how hard the humans fought, how even the smallest fighter had brought down drones and saved civilians. "We have to," he said softly. "There is no one else." The next morning, the long-range screens lit up with new signals. Marcus ran to the bridge and expanded the display. Laura leaned forward and felt her breath tight. 3 Varix squadrons were moving toward a system called Halden's Reach. It was not populated, but it sat on a path that led straight to 2 human colonies. If the Varix secured Halden's Reach, they would have a clear route to strike deeper. "Why go there?" Laura said. Trell answered. "They want to gather your forces in one place. They want you to follow them. They want a trap." Laura knew he was right. But she also knew she had no choice. If the Varix took that system, they could hit the colonies before Admiral Drake arrived. "We go," she said. "Prepare the ship." The Aurora moved with its escorts toward Halden's Reach. The space there was dark and empty, with drifting rocks shaped like broken blades. The Varix had arrived first. Their drones circled the rocks like vultures. Their larger ships waited behind the shadows. The moment the Aurora appeared, the Varix launched the attack. The first wave hit the shields with sharp blows. Ethan braced himself in engineering. The core hummed loudly, warning him that it was already near its safe limit. Laura ordered the fighters to spread out. She knew the Varix expected a direct attack, so she changed the pattern. The fighters broke into small pairs, darting between rocks and coming at the drones from angles the Varix did not predict. It worked at first. Several drones exploded in flashes of red light. But then a new shape emerged from behind a wide asteroid. It was a Varix destroyer, darker than the others, with glowing lines that pulsed like veins. Its main cannon fired a beam that tore through the rock field. Olivia yelled into the comm, "That thing is targeting anything that moves." Laura studied the destroyer. "We cannot fight it head-on. Marcus, find a weakness." Marcus scanned the ship. The readings came back strange. Its power source is exposed in the back, but reaching it is almost impossible. Nothing about this war was possible. Humans did not survive because things were easy. They survived because they never stopped pushing. Laura made her decision. "Ethan, prepare for a speed burst." Ethan froze. "The core is unstable if we push it too hard." "It will hold," she said. "It has to." Ethan nodded, even though his stomach twisted. The fighters drew the destroyer's attention. Olivia and 2 others flew low near the rocks, making sharp turns. The destroyer fired again, missing them by a narrow margin. The beam hit a cluster of stones and shattered them into bright dust. The Aurora dove forward. Ethan activated the core. The ship shot ahead with a violent burst. The lights flickered, panels shook. Ethan held onto the console to keep his balance. Laura aimed the Aurora at the destroyer's weak point. Marcus gave her distance readings. The engine screamed. The ship grew hotter. At the last moment, Laura shouted, "Fire!" The Aurora released a full volley. The shot struck the exposed power node. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a bright explosion tore the destroyer apart. The shockwave threw the Aurora off course. The fighters scattered. Ethan quickly shut down the core before it tore itself apart. Smoke filled part of the engineering bay. The destruction of the destroyer made the Variks pause, but only for a moment. Two more enemy ships emerged from behind the rocks. Laura saw them and knew they had only bought a small amount of time. "Fall back," she ordered. "We cannot win this battle. We must survive." The fighters regrouped. The Aurora pulled away from the system with damaged engines. The enemy ships followed for a short distance, then pulled back as if they had achieved their goal. The crew took long breaths. The battle had been fierce, but they were still alive. When they returned to the mining sector, Admiral Nathan Drake finally sent a message. His fleet was on its way. He would reach them soon. The crew felt a wave of relief, but Trell did not look relieved. His expression grew even more troubled. "What is it?" Laura asked. "The Variks wanted you to fight there," Trell said. "They wanted to test your new power. They wanted to know how strong your experimental system is." Marcus went pale. "So they know what we can do. And what your weakness is," Trell added softly. The room fell silent. The next morning, Admiral Drake arrived with the first wave of the human armada. The ships filled the sky: frigates, cruisers, carriers, and 3 heavy destroyers. Their engines burned like bright stars. For the first time since the beginning of the war, Laura felt a spark of hope. Drake's voice came through the comm. "Captain Kent, you held long enough. Now we fight together." The Admiral met with Laura, Ethan, Marcus, Olivia, and Trell on the Aurora's bridge. He studied Trell's device and the data Marcus had collected. "We need to strike the Variks before they unleash their full armada," Drake said. "That means finding their command relay." Laura agreed. "If we break their command link, their fleets lose coordination." "But the relay is deep behind their lines," Marcus said. "Almost impossible to reach." Drake smiled a little. "Impossible is why humans win wars." Ethan looked at the Admiral. "We will need more ships." "You will have them," Drake said. "But this mission must be led by someone who knows the Variks' patterns." His eyes turned to Laura. She understood. She would lead the infiltration mission. Ethan would join her. Marcus would manage the relay detection system. Olivia and a squadron of elite pilots would escort them. And Admiral Drake would lead the main armada in the frontline assault. The galaxy had reached a moment that felt like the sharp breath before a storm. The Variks Empire was preparing its full armada. The humans were gathering every last piece of strength they had. Both sides knew the next battle would decide everything. Far away in the dark veil of space, the Variks Emperor stood before his gathering fleet. Tens of thousands of drones floated in silent rows. The living ships pulsed like heartbeats in the void. The Emperor raised one hand. "Our victories have been endless," he said to his commanders. "But now we face the Deathworlders. Their spirit is dangerous. Their strength grows when it should break. We will show them the true power of our empire." He lowered his hand and the armada prepared to move. The final war was coming. The Variks Armada gathered in a formation so wide that even the strongest scanners could barely measure it. Their ships filled the dark with sharp lines of red light. Their drones floated in perfect rows, ready to launch. The Variks Emperor watched the fleet with calm pride. He believed the humans would break as so many had before. But far from the Emperor's view, the humans prepared for something he had never expected. On the Aurora, Laura Kent stood with her crew, looking at the star map Admiral Nathan Drake had provided. The map showed where the Variks fleets were moving, where their drones gathered, and where the command relay was hidden. The relay was deep inside a cluster of dense asteroids. It was protected by several layers of enemy ships. If the relay survived, the Variks Armada would be able to coordinate every attack. If the relay fell, the Empire's fleets would lose their main advantage. Laura knew the mission was dangerous. She also knew there was no choice. The human armada could not fight a fully coordinated Variks fleet. They needed chaos on the enemy side. Drake stood with his arms behind his back as he spoke. "I will lead the main assault. We will strike the front of their formation. We will draw their focus. While they deal with us, you will slip behind their lines." Marcus nodded slowly. "If we can reach the relay, we can shut it down." Ethan looked at the star cluster and then at the Aurora. "Our engines can get us there, but getting out will be harder." Laura placed her hand on the console. "Then we do not think about escape until the job is done." Olivia Grant entered the bridge wearing her pilot's suit. Her face was calm. "My squadron is ready. We will cover your approach." Trell sat near the rail, watching them quietly. His breathing was slower, but his eyes were clear. The Variks believe no one would dare to strike their relay. That is your advantage. You will surprise them. Admiral Drake nodded. Once you complete your mission, send the signal, then get out of there as fast as you can. The crew understood. This mission might be the most important in human history, and it might be the last thing they ever did. The human armada moved first. Drake's ship spread across the sky like a rising metal wall. Destroyers, cruisers, and carriers burned bright as they formed a long defensive line. Their engines glowed white-blue. Their weapons hummed with power. Across the void, the Variks Armada responded. Millions of drones activated their red lights. Heavy carriers slid into battle positions. The Emperor watched the humans with cold amusement. "They gather," he said. "They think they can delay us. Let them try." He raised his hand, and the Variks Armada advanced. The battle began with a wave of drones flying like a storm toward the human line. The humans fired first, releasing hundreds of beams and missiles. Explosions lit up the sky. The first wave of drones shattered, but more came. The main Variks fleet moved behind the drone wave, bringing heavier weapons. Their red beams tore through the dark. Several human ships shook under the first strikes, but Admiral Drake did not move back. He ordered the line to hold. "Keep firing," he said. "We give them no ground." The battle became a wall of sound and light. It was the perfect distraction. While the Armada fought, the Aurora slipped away from the battlefield. Olivia and her squadron flew in a tight formation around the ship. They used the chaos behind them as a shield. The Variks were too focused on the human armada to notice the small group moving toward the asteroid cluster. Laura kept the Aurora low, using shadows and drifting rocks to hide their signature. Marcus monitored the relay signals. Ethan adjusted the engines so the core would not overheat too early. When they finally saw the asteroid cluster, the crew fell silent. The rocks floated in tangled webs. Sharp edges caught the faint light, and in the center of the cluster, protected by layers of debris, stood the Variks relay. It looked like a giant dark tower. Red lines pulsed along its sides. It carried a strange living glow as if it breathed. Marcus whispered, "That is it. That is their nerve center." Olivia gave orders to her squadron. The fighters spread out, ready to intercept any drones. Laura brought the Aurora closer. Ethan watched the core levels rise. He felt sweat on his hands, but he did not stop. A sudden alarm sounded on the bridge. Marcus looked at the screen. "A patrol, 3 Variks ships heading toward us." Laura spoke quickly. "Olivia, take your squadron, hold them off." Olivia responded at once. "We'll keep them busy." Her fighters shot forward between the rocks. The Variks ships spotted them and changed course. The fighters and enemy ships clashed in small bursts of fire. Laura did not look away from the relay. "We advance. This is our moment." The Aurora entered the inner part of the cluster. The rocks grew closer. Ethan reduced the engine power to keep the ship quiet. Marcus followed the pulses from Trell's device. "We need to get within 1 kilometer to shut it down," he said. Trell stepped forward. "The relay's core will react fast. You must overload it." Laura nodded. "Ethan, prepare for an injection surge." Ethan's eyes widened slightly. "That could break our engines." "It will also break their relay," Laura said. Ethan hesitated for only a breath. Then he began adjusting the power lines. The core hummed louder. The ship trembled. Behind them, Olivia's voice cracked through the calm. "We are holding them, but more are coming. Be fast." Laura guided the Aurora to a narrow opening in the asteroid cluster. The relay loomed ahead, tall and silent. Its lights brightened as they approached, as if sensing their presence. Marcus's voice was tense. "We are in range. We can strike now." Laura took a long breath. "Ethan, release the surge." Ethan pressed the control. The Aurora's core released a burst of unstable energy. A bright beam shot from the ship and struck the relay. The relay shook. Red lines flickered. A sound like a deep metallic groan echoed through the cluster. Trell watched with wide eyes. "Again, it needs more." Ethan rerouted more power. The ship rocked violently. Sparks flew across the engineering bay. The second surge struck the relay and tore open one of its main sections. The relay began to collapse. Its lights dimmed. Its pulse slowed. Then the entire structure burst open in a wave of silent light. Marcus shouted, "We did it. The signals are gone. Their network is broken." Laura felt her chest tighten with relief. "Send the signal to Admiral Drake." Marcus transmitted the message. Now they had to escape, but the Variks were not blind. The destruction of the relay had created a shock across their fleets. The patrol ships that Olivia fought suddenly disengaged. They turned toward the Aurora. Olivia yelled into the comm, "You have incoming, 3 ships heading straight for you." Laura saw the shapes emerging from the rocks. "Ethan, full power, get us out." Ethan tried to activate the engines, but the core flickered. The overload had nearly destroyed it. "We do not have enough power," he said. Laura looked straight ahead. There was only one path. "Divert everything we have. Shields, weapons, lighting, take it all." Ethan slammed his hand on the controls. The lights across the ship dimmed. Even the bridge became darker, but the engines glowed again. The Aurora pushed forward, weaving between rocks. The Variks ships closed in behind them. Their beams cut through stones, trying to reach the Aurora. Olivia and her remaining fighters joined the chase. They fired at the enemy ships, trying to slow them. One fighter exploded behind the Aurora. Olivia shouted, "Keep going. Do not stop." Laura kept her eyes fixed on the only opening big enough for the ship to pass. Aurora burst through the cluster just as a beam grazed its tail. Ethan shouted, "Engines at maximum, we can outrun them." The Aurora shot forward, escaping the cluster. Olivia's surviving fighters followed. The Variks ships emerged seconds later but were slower. Their formation was broken. As Laura took the ship out of danger, a message came through. It was Admiral Drake. "Captain Kent," he said, "your mission worked. The Variks formation is collapsing. Their fleets are confused. We are pushing them back." Laura looked at her crew. They were covered in sweat and dust, but they were smiling. Trell closed his eyes. "The Empire will fall today," Ethan spoke softly. "Admiral, do you need support?" Drake answered. "Join the battle. Let us finish this together." Laura set the course. The Aurora turned toward the battlefield. The Variks Armada was already falling apart. Without the relay, their drones moved without direction. Their heavy ships fired at the wrong targets. Humans pushed forward with strength they had never been able to show before. Laura guided the Aurora into the fight. Ethan fired controlled bursts. Olivia's remaining fighters cut through drones with sharp precision. The human fleet advanced like a rising storm. Admiral Drake ordered a full push. "Break their line," he said. The humans broke through the center of the Variks formation. The enemy ships scattered. Some tried to escape. Others fought without purpose. By the end of the battle, the Variks Armada was gone. The Empire collapsed. The surviving worlds were free. Laura, Ethan, Marcus, Olivia, and Trell stood on the bridge of the Aurora, watching the stars return to calm silence. The human armada gathered in formation, their ships shining bright. Admiral Drake's voice came softly through the comm. "We have won. Humanity stands strong." Laura felt the weight of the war lift from her shoulders. "It is over," she said. Ethan looked out the window. "We did more than survive. We proved who we are." Marcus nodded. "The galaxy will remember this day." Trell smiled quietly. "Your victories were not endless, but your courage was." The Aurora turned toward Earth. They would return as heroes. And across the galaxy, everyone understood one truth. Humanity, the Deathworlder species no one respected, had become the strongest force against tyranny.